blueprints to the fortress, anchoring, backfire effects, and why even scientists fall into psychological traps. Welcome to An Overthinker's Almanac. This is part 4 of my 5-part series From Bricks to Bridges, the story of how my biggest failure during COVID taught me why facts fail and why philosophy and psychology matter as much as science if we want to create real change. For most of my career, I've been an R&D nerd, though my mantra came from a line in Ghostbusters when Sigourney Weaver sizes up Bill Murray and says, "You don't seem like a scientist, you're more of a game show host." That line always stuck with me because I've never quite fit the lab coat stereotype. And it became quite clear in 2020 during my quixotic effort to combat the tidal wave of misinformation on social media, especially from my relatives. It all came to a head when I responded to a post with what I thought was a carefully fact-checked reply, only to be met with, "I know I'm right because I'm being fact-checked." In part 2, we discussed the critical importance of knowing your audience, particularly identifying those who are open to listening versus those for whom there's no hope. In part 3, we explored philosophy, which offers some of the best tools for engaging a closed-off audience and managing our emotions. Now it's time for more Monday morning quarterbacking. What was really going on beneath the surface, and why do our brains lean on hard-coded defense mechanisms? So pull up a couch. It's time for some psychology. First brick set the precedent. Let's rewind. Imagine learning something entirely new for the first time. Your mind palace doesn't have a neat little shelf for it yet. You don't know if it's true, so what do? If you're like most people, you look at the source. Who's telling me this? Do I trust them? If yes, the new fact becomes part of your foundation. If no, you might still take it in, but you'll mortar it with a little suspicion, or even create your own brick with the opposite meaning. Either way, that first brick establishes the baseline. And because our brains tend to compare new information against what's already there, that first exposure becomes the standard. In psychology, this is called the anchoring bias. When we've got no prior knowledge, we grab onto the first thing we hear and use it as the reference point for everything else. Now, think back to early 2020. Almost no one alive had real experience with a global pandemic. The closest mental bricks were the flu, SARS, or maybe the bird flu panic from years earlier. Scientists compared it to the 1918 Spanish flu, but always with caveats. We don't know how infectious this is yet. We don't know how lethal this will be. Good science is cautious. Good scientists admit what they don't know. That's great for journals and conferences, but terrible for the general public. Uncertainty doesn't feel safe, and "we don't know yet" is not a comforting brick to build on. While scientists understand that caution is part of their language, speaking the same way to the masses drives more caution and skepticism, triggering, "These guys in white coats have no idea what they're doing." So, in those early days, who gained the upper hand? The ones willing to speak with certainty and simplicity. The voices saying, "It's just the flu," or "Don't worry about it," dropped easy-to-grasp bricks. They fit people's existing mental models. There was a pre-existing section on the flu. Others deflected to origins or conspiracies. In both cases, it was more clear and concrete than the foggy "we're still learning" shared by experts. Brains crave order. We prefer the simple story over the messy truth. Simplicity is building with Legos, while complexity is a delicate, complicated mosaic. Integrating colorful Lego blocks takes much less energy than making sense of confusing scientific mosaics. In 2020, while scientists were still carefully gathering data, the internet was already churning out complete Lego kits with bright, simple, and endlessly repeatable talking points that many latched onto. Why simple stories win? Here's the thing about our brains. They're lazy. Not malicious lazy a la binge watching all of Breaking Bad in a weekend, just efficiency obsessed. If a new idea is simple, clear, and easy to process, it feels more true. Psychologists call this cognitive fluency. Virology is complex, with mutation rates, R0 values, asymptomatic transmission. It's a mouthful of complicated jargon even for scientists. In the early months of COVID, the real experts were cautious, careful, and nuanced, as they're trained to be when talking to other scientists or serving as experts. However, Without a science speak translator, to the public ear, it sounded like, we really don't know. Meanwhile, social media was serving up one-liners that were simple enough to print on a bumper sticker. It's just the flu. Masks don't work. It's all about control. These talking points were wrong, but they were simple. And because most people lacked sufficiently informed knowledge bricks, these statements were easy to remember and repeat, enabling them to spread faster than the virus itself. This is where the availability heuristic kicks in. The more often you encounter a claim, the more weight your brain gives it. Even if it's false, repetition breeds familiarity, and familiarity breeds acceptance. It's why memes and talking points, not journal articles, dominated news feeds, and why politicians from both sides tend to use this technique to repeat the same thing over and over. I keep hearing this, so it must be true. In COVID, it all added up, creating a perfect storm. First exposure and anchoring bias set the baseline. Simplicity and cognitive fluency made it stick. Repetition and the availability heuristic cements it into the fortress walls. Brains crave coherence, not complexity. We want the Lego kit, not the fragile stained glass mosaic. And once those Lego bricks start piling up, it's incredibly hard for nuance, data, or uncertainty to compete. This is about when I showed up, thinking that my carefully worded, data-backed post would knock down a fortress built from endless Lego blocks and viral memes. If you're enjoying this series out of order, spoiler, it didn't go well. See part 1. When bricks push back. So what happens when you try to toss a new fact brick onto someone else's carefully arranged Lego wall? Think about the last time you confidently repeated something you thought was true, only to discover you were wrong. How did that make you feel? If you're like most people, there was an element of frustration, false confidence, and anger. You're less likely to be grateful to be corrected and more likely to get super defensive and be convinced that the corrector is an idiot. No, I swear I read that somewhere. That's your brain firing up the first auto defense system, the backfire effect. Instead of reconsidering, we double down. The very moment we should be updating our palace, we're boarding up the windows and preparing for a siege. And it gets worse. Confidence doesn't rise slowly with actual knowledge. Learn a couple of bricks worth of information, and suddenly you're an expert with confidence skyrocketing right out of the gate. Psychologists chart this as the Dunning-Kruger effect, where confidence peaks long before competence. At the top of this curve sits the infamous Mount Stupid. The air is thin, the views are spectacular, self-confidence is epic, and the best part, you don't even have to know that much. It's a great place to pitch a tent, and particularly on the internet, you find a lot of confident campers entrenched up here. But if you keep learning, big if, reality eventually sets in. You tumble down into the valley of despair where your confidence crashes as you realize just how vast the subject really is. The climb back towards genuine expertise is slow and humbling, but it's the only path to real knowledge. I've lived this myself. A friend once asked, jokingly I think, if I could help him make meth because I have a PhD in chemistry. I told him, I'm not that kind of chemist. His response, dude, if toothless high school dropouts can do it, you'd be freaking Heisenberg. So yeah, the climb out of the valley is long, and the more you know, the more aware you are of how little you know. The trouble for most people is that they prefer the view from Mount Stupid. It feels good up here. It's sunny. You're confident. And all it takes to stay is a steady supply of defenses to keep out any inconvenient new facts. You have a perceived higher ground of knowledge to swat away anything that conflicts with your shiny Lego palace. As accusatory as I am, the truth is, even scientists aren't immune. We like to think we're building knowledge brick by brick, questioning everything. But too often, our peopleness exceeds our scienciness, and we fall prey to the same biases, seeking only the results that confirm our hunches, dismissing experiments that don't fit, and stopping our search as soon as things make sense. This brings us to a centrally unifying issue creating conflict and tension, confirmation bias, believing in and even exclusively seeking knowledge that confirms what we already believe. And if you think confirmation bias only lives in Facebook threads or political echo chambers, I have bad news for you. It grows just fine in the lab too. Even scientists break the rules. It's tempting to believe that science is immune to these psychological traps, particularly if you're a scientist. After all, the whole point of science is to test, question, and revise. In theory, it's the anti-Mount Stupid discipline. However much we stand out with our white coats, pocket protectors, and secret desire to discuss Doctor Who or Battlestar Galactica, scientists are still human. Our humanness often wins over our scienciness. We too are prone to confirmation bias. Despite our training, we give more weight to information that supports what we already believe and discount information that doesn't. Ideally, you should fight this urge and look for conflicting information. We should ask questions seeking to understand, not just replicate our findings. Scientifically, replication is boring, but it feels cozy. It's comfy, giving us little dopamine bumps, reconfirming how smart we are. Yet, that's not where real breakthroughs and objective knowledge originate. As anyone who's had a genuine scientific breakthrough will tell you, novel innovations are more likely to originate with, that's weird, than, yep, just like I thought it would work. Too often, when we have a theory, we seek out new information that supports our hypothesis rather than searching for conflicting information. We're far more likely to accept results of an experiment that went precisely as planned. Even as card-carrying science practitioners, we're much more prone to attempt discrediting experiments that don't match our expected results and stop working once the data agrees with what we already believe. Psychologists call this the make sense stopping rule. The moment we find evidence that matches our theory, we stop looking. It's the intellectual equivalent to finding your keys. It's always in the last place you look. Well, duh. Once they're in your hand, you don't keep searching the couch cushions or checking under the car seat. You stop. Mission accomplished. But agreement doesn't equal universal reality. The same thing happens outside the lab. We Google until we hit the article or meme that confirms what we already thought, then stop scrolling. Why keep going if you've already found the truth? Never mind that it's just one cherry-picked result floating in an ocean of contradictory evidence. So yeah, even scientists break the rules. In the psychology hierarchy, human is greater than scientist. We're supposed to be professional fortress inspectors, trained to look for cracks. But more often than we'd like to admit, we're just stacking bricks that make us feel more secure. So far, this merely covers when the stakes are informational. As tricky as it is to confront a wrong fact brick, things get exponentially harder when the walls aren't just built from data, but from identity. That's where we'll go next time, because once tribal defense mechanisms kick in, forget refuting information. It's about belonging, trust, and who we see ourselves as. And conflicting facts don't stand a chance. And that's a wrap for episode 4 of From Bricks to Bridges. This is the penultimate episode of a 5-part series, with new episodes dropping every Tuesday. Each one builds on the last, pun fully intended, so I'd love for you to stick with me as I keep overthinking my way through the messy intersection of science, philosophy, and psychology. Thanks for listening. Seriously, it means a lot that you're willing to spend a bit of your time with me as I sort through these lessons out loud. Until next time, cheers.